These are some top NBA prospects that resulted in disaster. And we're going to start with Harry Giles, who committed to Duke in 2016. Now, Giles was for a very long time the best guy in the class, ahead of guys like Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, De'Aaron Fox, and Jason Tatum. He was supposed to be a star, and according to Tatum, he was by far the best player in our grade. He had special explosiveness, and his quickness up and down the court was sensational. He could overpower defenders and get to the rim with bursts of strength, and had all the potential to do the same at every level. Really, since he was a kid, Harry Giles was disgusting, man. This guy was a giant, lanky, athletic freak, which was really about 85% of the reason for the hype, but a good reason nonetheless. When it came to his skill on the floor, Giles was a pretty advanced ball handler at his size, and didn't look like he hadn't grown into his body yet. He was relatively smooth for a giant-ass kid, and he was dominating. In his sophomore year, he suffered a relatively minor injury. A setback, but nothing that slowed him down for long. He rehabbed diligently, and returned to the court looking every bit like the phenom scouts had been raving about. But during international competition with Team USA, Harry's world changed. On a routine contact play, he suffered a devastating ACL and MCL tear. It was his first major injury, and really it's about as brutal as it gets. Still, he attacked rehab with the same intensity. Months later, when he returned to his high school team, he showed a little sign of wear, so dominant that his squad remains ranked number 2 in the nation. For his senior year, Harry transferred to Oak Hill Academy. Hopes were high, but in a cruel twist of fate, just 2 minutes into the opening game, he tore his ACL in the other knee, again on a contact play. 2 major knee injuries, 2 fucking ACL tears, and yet Harry's talent still demanded respect. Even without stepping on the court again that year, ESPN still ranked him the #1 player in the nation as a Duke commit without any fucking cartilage. Now, college is where this gets really weird. I don't exactly know what this guy was feeling, but really it seemed like this guy recognized that if he played at all in college, he dominated high school enough for an NBA team to take a shot at him, kind of like Kyrie Irving at his days at Duke. And despite not looking like he really should have been out there at all, we got to see what was supposed to be the top prospect in the country playing in college at like 50% or something. He put up just 4 points and 4 boards per game. I mean, this wasn't at all a portrayal of his talents, more so just showing NBA teams that he still has knees, and teams still believed in his upside. And so, he went straight to the draft, where he was drafted 20th overall by the Trailblazers, who traded his rights to the Sacramento Kings. Giles would be set for what should have been his rookie season in hopes that his knee would fully recover, which he really should have just done in college, and so his rookie season would be in the 2018-2019 season. There were flashes of promise, but they were few and far between, averaging 7-4 in his rookie season while coming off the bench. The Kings were super bought into this guy's rehab. I mean, from technological advancements that I couldn't even begin to explain because I'm a YouTuber for a living, they invested a lot in Giles, and in return, it's hard to say he gave them nothing. From building up his frame to working out hard and receiving immense praise throughout the locker room as a super high IQ, crafty, ball-handling big, he was doing what he could to reach his potential. Like I said before, about 85% of the Harry Giles hype was the big, athletic, lanky 4. 15% was the ball handling and overdeveloped skill set. But really, when you bust 2 ACLs and your game is primarily athleticism, you really kind of lost what all the hype was about. Through 3 seasons, he dropped 7 a game at his best. Really, it wasn't much to write home about. He was a project that, if they rode to completion, really wouldn't have yielded the best results due to some horrific luck with injuries at an insanely young age. The Kings would decline his third-year player option, but his goodbye wasn't in any way bitter. Fans loved him, even though he didn't give them much, and they felt for him due to the constant injury issues that he had to endure. His high school talents really just never panned out, but you can't really blame him for that. Really, it sucks, because as a high IQ player with all the talent in the world and work ethic supported by everyone he worked with, there's definitely a world out there where Harry Giles is still frying dudes on the floor. If you're watching this video right now, there's a 90% chance that you're not subscribed to the channel, so make sure to change that for me. We're trying to hit 100k by the end of the year, and it would really help me a lot. LeBron James is known for many things, including being one of the most highly touted recruits in NBA history. But what if I told you that there was a guy who for a time was supposed to be better than him, who never even made it to the NBA? If the name Lenny Cooke doesn't ring a bell, I don't blame you. But back in the early 2000s, he was in conversations with guys like Carmelo Anthony, Amari Stoudemire, and even LeBron James himself as the best high school player in the world. In the class of '02, he was regarded as the second best player in the class, right behind Melo and right in front of Stoudemire and Raymond Felton. But at the ABCD camp in 2001, LeBron took over, winning MVP of the camp, smacking a game winner over Cooke's head, and supplanting himself as the best high school player out there, dominating Lenny Cooke. But Cooke kept trucking on, and in the 8 games he was able to play in his senior season, he averaged 31 and 15. By the end of that year, he had offers to go to schools like St. John or North Carolina, but like many players in his era, he tried his luck in the draft. Many teams said that they would take him if he had declared, and so for him, it was a no-brainer, and I don't blame him either. But pick after pick passed, and Cooke wasn't selected, meaning that he had to find a third route to basketball stardom. He would play for the USBL's Brooklyn Kings and show off, averaging 29 and 9 on his way to Rookie of the Year honors, but it still wasn't enough. He would be invited to play in the Summer League with the Boston Celtics, but he would never get further than that. He would go on to play in the Philippines and China, averaging insane numbers in both, but he just couldn't find a suitor in the NBA. But there were some gaping holes in his game. At 6'6", he lacked any real perimeter skills and would have struggled against big men in the NBA. He wasn't motivated and did put in a ton of work in the gym. The people around him made it believe he was so great, and although he was at one time, it fucked with his attitude towards hard work and development, so that when he had to play with players who had developed into as good, if not better players than him, he got cooked. And by the year 2007, he was out of the basketball world completely, while the guys that he grew up playing were balling at the highest level. Jaylen Hands was a top point guard in the 2017 high school class, ranked above guys like Trae Young and Davion Mitchell. And after the consensus 5-star recruit committed to play at UCLA after running it up with DeAndre Ayton, expectations were high. He had uncanny court vision and had the speed to blow by defenders off the dribble. He could knock down his shots and played with incredible pace for a young point guard. As a high school player, honestly, this guy would have done fucking numbers if he was playing back in the day, when mixtapes were in their prime, because this guy's game was just disgusting. Obviously, the in-your-face aspect of his game was that he was like 6'2", putting his balls in defenders' faces, but he could also create shots without any wasted dribbling. Fun was kind of the best way to describe his game, but in a mature way. He was high energy, spinning the ball off the glass on some reverse layup, while also having the footwork and body control to not make it too difficult on himself. This guy was a high school legend through and through. In his first year at UCLA, he would sit behind Aaron Holiday, averaging 10 and 4 while shooting at around 40%. But he would decide to stay for a second year to get in the spotlight while Holiday moved on. And in that season, he would average 14 points per game, lead the Pac-12 in assists with 6.1, and get all-conference honors. Although he was not exactly a top draft prospect, he had done enough to catch some eyes, and so he decided to forego his final 2 years, hire an agent, and enter the draft. But there were some really obvious holes that caused him to struggle with the process. His hands were measured the smallest at the combine, which is insanely ironic, obviously, and teams struggled to believe that he could make a real difference on defense due to his lack of strength and awareness. But even then, teams saw some upside with his quickness and smooth shooting ability, but his shortcomings were still glaring. Because of this, he would be selected 56th overall by the Clippers before getting sent to the Nets, who assigned them to their G League affiliate. He would average 11, 3 and 3 in the G League as a rookie before getting moved to the Pistons, who would renounce his draft rights just months later. Really, Jaylen Hands is tough because his physical limitations he has are just barely enough to keep this dude out of the league. Hands is athletic enough to be an NBA point, easily. He crashed the glass pretty fearlessly in college, and although he's skinny, this guy could definitely be a Diet Ja Morant somewhere. In a league that values potential above all, Hands' ceiling was unfortunately not really worth taking the risk on. While being a bit undersized made his floor lower than you would really like, he wasn't a guarantee whatsoever. I mean, if this guy got a chance, I really don't know that he would have shown enough to stay around, but in the NBA, there's only so many chances to go around. At just 14 years old, 7th Woods would drop a mixtape that would go on to be the most viewed high school highlight reel in internet history, with over 16 million views. In just 2.5 minutes, the world saw what looked like the future of basketball. A freshman with buttery handles, jaw-dropping bounce, and a knack for soaring above defenders with his head at the rim. He wasn't a viral sensation, he was the sensation. With a body and skill set far beyond his years, 7th Woods didn't seem to have a ceiling. And unlike so many before him, his game wasn't built on smoke and mirrors. This kid really had it. The comparisons came quick, the praise even quicker. Wherever he went, gyms were packed, fans lined up for photos, scouts from every major college program were watching in awe. This kid was crazy, bro. He was bodying dudes as a middle schooler. Really, this guy looked like he had a mortgage and a couple of kids to take care of, but really he was just chilling in Algebra 1 at noon and dunking on top prospects in front of packed crowds by the evening. In his sophomore season, he delivered, averaging 20 points and 4 steals per game, and even dropped 40 on future NBA guard Dennis Smith Jr. The mixtapes kept coming, and so did the hype. His athleticism was freakish. His instincts on defense arguably was his most underrated weapon. His trajectory, really, wherever he ran with it. But then, the spotlight started to dim. There was no injury, no single moment that defined his downfall. It was more like a slow fade, a gradual cooling off that no one could quite explain. By his junior and senior years, his numbers were still solid, 16, 17 points per game, but his game hadn't evolved in any way. The once limitless potential began to feel very limited by his lack of growth as a player, while really the rest of the pack just caught up. 7th Woods fell from the top of the rankings to the 59th spot in his class. Yet based on the fame he built earlier in high school, he was still given opportunities others in that range rarely get. He committed to UNC, a dream school, a top 3 program. On paper, it should have been a moment to celebrate, but in reality, it just marked the beginning of the end. At UNC, Woods was buried behind star point guard Joel Berry. Minutes were hard to come by, but even worse, so was confidence. The spotlight that once lifted him now weighed heavy. He second-guessed every move, afraid to make mistakes. His production plummeted to just 1.5 points per game on dismal shooting. The kid who was once seen as a generational guard couldn't find a rhythm. Later, Woods would admit, "I thought I had to be perfect. Every turnover, every mistake, I felt like people were watching, waiting for me to fail." The pressure to live up to the mixtape version of himself crushed him. After 3 quiet seasons at UNC, Woods transferred, first to South Carolina, then to Morgan State. Downsizing didn't change the outcome. His game never truly developed. No reliable jump shot, no improved court vision, and without the high-flying dunks that once made him famous, there wasn't really much left. He finished his college career averaging just 5 points per game. 7th Woods became a cautionary tale of the mixtape era, a player who peaked far, far too early, overwhelmed by expectations that he didn't ask for. What started as a viral dream turned into a burden too heavy for a teenager to carry. The bounce, the handle, the buzz, all of it just came a little too fast and too soon. And in the end, the internet highlights span of a star before he ever had the chance to become a player that was really worthy of that recognition. As a high schooler, Isaiah Todd was seen as one of the best players to come out of the Baltimore area since Moses Malone. And entering his sophomore year of high school, he's ranked as the #1 player in his class. He would spend some time moving around different high schools before landing at the Word of God Christian Academy in Raleigh, where he would round out his high school career with offers from damn near everywhere. As a consensus 5-star, Todd was looking to go to schools like Michigan, Kentucky, or Kansas, and would eventually commit to Michigan, but in April of his senior year, he would make an interesting decision to decommit and go play for the G League Ignite in their inaugural season. Isaiah Todd was nice, man. He's a 6'10" power forward with fluidity of a guy that's like 6'6", 6'7". That might not sound like a major difference to you, but the slippery smoothness and coordination of a wing in a big's body is enormous at any level. In 15 games with the team, he would average 12-5 before declaring for the draft in the following season, and was seen as an underrated prospect for the right team. Now, I don't know about you, but the G League Ignite is honestly the dumbest thing in the world. It's a skill showcase more than a developmental program. I mean, it's like saying AAU gets you ready for college ball. It may get you scouted, but your workouts in the offseason, combined with the IQ and system play you pick up in high school ball, is what actually determines your collegiate success. And although it was clear he was talented as a 6'10" spot-up shooter with wing-like finesse and coordination, he was still just playing empty basketball, and largely for that reason, he wouldn't go until the first pick in the second round. On paper, it looked like he had all the tools. He was a good shooter for his size, standing at 6'10", and his mobility allowed him to get to the rim and make some acrobatic shots. He had tremendous body control and possessed all the potential a team might want for a 31st draft pick. First of all, the G League Ignite was enticing for a guy like Todd, who would have been playing in the pre-NIL days of the NCAA, but really, it just lacked the real structure like I said before. The G League has always been some pretty dogshit basketball, and it lacked visibility that was available at the college scene. And when you watched his game, some issues started to come out of the woodworks. He had a low effort on literally everything that had anything to do with motor, and his defensive IQ was a thing of ugliness. People were worried he would get absolutely bullied on the interior, and they realized that it was a real big risk to deal with, because in order to bulk up, there was a chance he would lose the athleticism that made him the player that teams loved. And even worse, it felt like he just had zero feel for the game. And it turned out that the haters were right. He spent more time in the G League than in the NBA once drafted, and it wasn't like he was improving much in that scene either. He played a total of 18 games over the course of 2 seasons with the Wizards, and fell to averaging 6.5 points and 2.5 boards in his final G League season before deciding to take the overseas route, as most guys do at that level. Now, what exactly went wrong with Isaiah Todd? Well, I've harped on his decision to play in the G League Ignite enough, but when it comes to the X's and O's, he didn't patch up enough of his holes to turn into a real option. He was intriguing, don't get me wrong, but in terms of being a real stretch big in the NBA, he really just didn't have it. Yes, it's true that a big man that can stretch the floor is the bread and butter of NBA basketball, but that's in the case that they can handle defending the paint, crashing the glass, and guarding post players. Look at guys like Dragon Bender, Skal Labissiere, or Thonmaker. World of upside, but couldn't handle the bare minimum in terms of positional requirements. So really, it's more so just building a skyscraper on a paper foundation. We really didn't see enough of Isaiah Todd in the NBA to get a real idea of what he was. He played like absolute shit, don't get me wrong, but when given the opportunity in the G League, this guy seemed to fail to make the jump from high school to professional at any level for reasons previously stated. Another guy who took the G League Ignite route is Jaden Hardy, who's considered a top 5 recruit in the 2021 class, ahead of guys like Scoot, Jabari Smith, and Jaylen Duren. As a junior, Hardy averaged 39 and 8, earning the Gatorade Player of the Year award in Nevada and securing his status as a dangerous player for the future. Even though he didn't play in his senior season, he was still considered as the best offensive player in his draft class, and was already placed in the lottery of most mock drafts, even going as high as 2nd overall. He could hit jumpers that had a high degree of difficulty, very score-first guard, natural killer, I'd say, just polishing up the actual skills to be one. I mean, oftentimes he was slashing to the rim pretty fearlessly, whether he had the touch for it or not. Really, the world was waiting for him to get the skill to convert the looks he was taking. With the Ignite, he averaged 17.7 points per game, which looks pretty damn good, but he did it while shooting 35% from the field and 27% from three-point land. Teams began to fear that Hardy was going to be an inefficient shot chucker, because he kind of was one. So his draft stock began to slide. But at least he was still playing against professionals, and so people thought that teams didn't have to worry that much about Hardy's NBA potential. Well, going into draft day, most people still believed that Hardy would be a first rounder. A lottery pick? No, but at least a first rounder. Yet as the hours went by, Hardy's name was still on the board, all the way up to the 2nd round when he would be selected with the 37th overall pick. He was picked by the Kings before subsequently getting traded to the Mavericks, but potential was still there. I mean, Jaden Hardy was a fat project. There wasn't necessarily a go-to skill he had as a scorer. At times his shot was shaky. He was an unwilling and untalented playmaker, and his touch wasn't fantastic, but as a bucket hunter, if NBA mentoring could sharpen his knife enough, I guess this guy had the physical gifts to kill shit. I'm sure that the Mavs fans were delighted to have him. He was supposed to be a first-round pick, but dropped into their hands. He would spend just a bit of time in the G League before getting some decent playing time for Dallas, averaging 8.8 points per game while shooting 40% from 3. He had games where he looked like the player that people thought he would be back in high school, and he began proving the teams that passed him up wrong. But in the next season, he would hit sort of a sophomore slump that he didn't really recover from. He would go from splits of 44, 40, and 82 to 41, 36, and 78. And although those aren't bad, people started to nitpick the weaker parts of his game. think he had 0D, or his IQ was of a potato. Throughout the chaos of the Mavs season, Hardy has gotten more of an opportunity than ever. With that being said, his efficiency still isn't what Mavs fans want it to be. Even though he has recently signed a 3-year extension, it doesn't seem that he's on the path to stardom or even a starting role, in a season where he should have taken over, especially when the Mavs fans were barely rolling out a team. He hasn't impressed, and that is concerning. Really is just a score-first guy that doesn't do anything else. He hasn't hit the efficiency numbers that you want to see. This thing just kind of seems like a skill issue. And until that changes, this guy's a fringe fourth point guard on a team type of player. The high school class of 2018 was stacked with future NBA talents, and sitting near the top ahead of Zion, Darius Garland, and Tyler Hero was shooting guard Romeo Langford, who would take his talents to Indiana after receiving offers from damn near everywhere. He spent 4 years at his public high school rather than transferring to a prep school, and trust me, there are a lot of schools that would have taken him. But it didn't matter where he played, he was just that good. He finished his high school career with 3,002 points and averaged 35 and 10 as a senior. He was a scoring threat with a 6'10 wingspan that gave him the length he needed at the shooting guard position. He was a solid vertical athlete and a good rebounding wing, and could move well enough laterally to be a very solid defender. He averaged 16 and 5 as a freshman before declaring for the draft. He wasn't necessarily as efficient as people hoped, shooting 27% from deep, but the vision wasn't that he was going to be some knockdown three-point specialist. People coined him as a Jimmy Butler type of player, and someone who could come in and be a tough two-way guard to deal with. So, to be blunt, Romeo Langford was a total brick, but the redeeming quality in his game was that this guy had NBA physicality and a real impressive ability to finish through traffic. Maybe not immediately, but over time, I'm sure this guy could develop into a really solid defender, and maybe, but not likely, develop into a decent shooter. He would end up being a lottery pick when the Boston Celtics took him with the 14th overall pick, but things started to spiral. His NBA career has been very disappointing, to say the least. After going through ankle issues in his rookie season and wrist surgery in his second, he had played a total of 50 games with splits of 35, 22, and 73. I mean, like I said, Langford is a brick and was either sitting in the corner spotting up and building houses or sitting on the bench with an injury. Maybe the right team could have cooked with this guy a little more, but the Celtics didn't really have that kind of usage to give him. The Celtics would move him, but after a year and a half with the Spurs, he wasn't making any difference. A good amount of the blame really fell on injuries or a lack of a real role. But if you haven't put yourself on the map by year 4 of your NBA career, then you're probably going to just fade out. And that was exactly the case for Romeo. His shooting was terrible, and he just couldn't give coaches much of a reason to put him on the floor apart from being a decent defender. There wasn't much else, and after some time in the G League and overseas, Langford has disappeared. After leading his high school team to a state championship as a freshman, lanky forward Emoni Bates started to pick up traction as the best recruit in the class of 2022. And after becoming the first ever sophomore to win the Gatorade National Player of the Year award in the following year, expectations soared. Bates was a dangerous shot maker, and with his quick trigger, could shoot over defenders with ease. He drew comparisons to guys like Kevin Durant due to his size and tough shot-making ability. I mean, that alone tells you the kind of ceiling you're looking at. The hype only grew as his high school career went on, but after reclassifying from the 22 class to 21, it was time for him to move on to the next level. He would commit to play basketball at Michigan State before flipping to Memphis to play alongside fellow 5-star Jaylen. And although Jaylen lived up to the hype, Bates was riddled with injuries and couldn't put together a stellar season, averaging just 9.7 points and 3.3 rebounds before transferring to Eastern Michigan to look for a fresh start as he had drastically fallen in draft predictions. There he would average 19 and 6, but any hopes of becoming a first-round pick were kinda gone at that point. It was too much of a gamble to take Bates. He measured in at 6'9" with a 6'7" wingspan, and teams started to boil down his incredible high school days to early development, rather than the one-of-a-kind talent that people believed he had. Additionally, he wasn't that athletic, wasn't that strong, and was seen as a liability on defense. And oh yeah, he had gotten into some legal trouble after pleading guilty to a gun charge, which certainly didn't help his cause at all either. As one NBA scout put it prior to the draft, Emoni Bates wasn't even on our board, just too much of a circus. But the Cavaliers would take a chance on him with the 49th overall pick and sign him to a two-way deal. Over the last 2 years, he has played a total of 25 games in the NBA while spending most of his time in the G League, averaging 19.8 points last season and 18.5 this season on sub 40% shooting. When Bates was first drafted, there were some very excited Cavaliers fans going as far as to say that he would be getting real minutes and a full roster spot, and that he was a lottery ticket. And to be honest, we don't really quite know yet. He hasn't spent too much time in the league. But there's no doubt that a ton of his high school hype still hasn't worn off. His scoring at times looks great in the G League, and I mean, he really is trying to beat out a bunch of guys playing for the top team in the East right now, but I guess that only time can tell if things will work out for him in the end. Born and raised in Saginaw, Michigan, Brian Bowen became a sought-after prospect after leading his team to a state title game and earning co-MVP honors at the Jordan Classic. The big and versatile wing was full of upside. It seems like a guy who could do just about anything on the floor. He was extremely effective from outside the arc and was virtually ambidextrous inside the paint or with his floater game. He held offers from MSU, Texas, Louisville, and tons of other D1 schools. Will land on Louisville to play for Coach Rick Pitino, but then came the big scandal and the federal investigation into the school, which discovered illicit payments to recruits. Bowen himself was suspended from playing, and even though he would make an attempt to transfer and play at the University of South Carolina, the investigation barred him from playing there either. With his college career effectively over before it had began, Bowen would choose to sign with the Sydney Kings of the NBL, and after playing 30 games while averaging 6 and 3, he had become eligible for the 2019 draft, and there was still some hope for him. His 6'7" frame with a 6'10" wingspan gave Bowen an NBA-ready body, and although he still needed to get in the weight room, the potential was there. But unfortunately, a lot of the hype was overshadowed by controversy, and he would go undrafted despite the allure that he brought for other teams, before signing a two-way deal with the Pacers and become a presence for the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, dropping 16 and 8 in the first year with them. Still, that wasn't enough to secure a real NBA role, as he would go on to play just 12 games over the course of 2 seasons with the Pacers. He spent the past few years bouncing around different G League teams, most recently for the Stockton Kings, but it's looking like the time is running out for Bowen to get a shot in the league, as he most recently averaged just 7 points and 5 rebounds a game. It appears as if Bowen will go down as another hyped-up high school recruit who never quite made it. When you take his college scandal, his overseas season, and his journey after going undrafted, Bowen's story really isn't very simple. In 2015, a Haitian big man by the name of Skal Labissiere broke out as the next great big, after surviving an earthquake that caused him to move from his home country to Memphis. Labissiere quickly asserted himself, and his size, agility, and fluid movement caused some eyes to start looking his way. ESPN called him walking potential and marked his weaknesses down as simply continuing to add strength and build weight. And at that age, that's a pretty normal thing. When John Calipari was able to get him to sign and play for Kentucky, he compared him to Anthony Davis, and so did everyone else, who had already marked him down as a top pick in the next year's draft. But he was nowhere near Anthony Davis level. Shit, he was barely the best power forward on his team, and would see himself getting benched. He was so weak on the floor and constantly got pushed around by players smaller than him. He looked bad, looked constantly lost, couldn't rebound, and was very, very raw on offense. But regardless of how disappointing he might have been, he still declared for the draft following his freshman season, and although he was nowhere near the lottery pick range, his reputation and his upside gave teams at least a couple of reasons to take a chance on the big man. The Kings would take him with the 28th pick, and to be honest, there were flashes of his former self in his rookie season, including an impressive 32 and 11 performance off the bench against the Suns. He would spend much of his rookie season in the G League, but get some decent playing time, but he was nowhere near efficient. He went from shooting at 54% in his rookie season to 45% in the next. But after the arrivals of Bielitsa and Marvin Bagley, he would see his role drop significantly from 20 minutes per game to 8. He would end up getting moved to Portland, but would still struggle to find a real role for 2 years, and injuries didn't exactly help either. Since then, Labissiere has moved around different overseas organizations before finding a home once again with the Kings organization. And in this wild season that the team had, was actually able to get himself into the game a couple times when he wasn't with their G League team. Now, Josh Selby was supposed to be next up, ranked as the #1 player in the 2010 class by rivals and ahead of guys like Tobias Harris and Kyrie Irving. Selby's deep shooting range, electric athleticism, and ability to run straight through defenders made him seem like he was NBA ready, but after committing to play for the Kansas Jayhawks, things went south and quickly. Before playing a single game, Selby would be suspended by the NBA for accepting impermissible benefits. but when he did finally make his debut, he made a splash. Well, at first. In his first 13 games, he would score double figures in 9 games, but in the final 13 games, he wouldn't even break 10 once. By the time his freshman season had come to an end, he had averaged just 7.9 points on 37% shooting, and his draft stock would begin to fall rapidly. But even though his season had been riddled with mishaps, he would still declare for the draft no matter where he stood. And let's just say that he didn't stand in the best spot, because he would be drafted 49th overall by the Grizzlies in the 2011 draft. There had been some questions about his efficiency and about his ball handling, as they had both appeared to be subpar throughout his career. And then there was his playmaking, which haunted him the most, with an assist-to-turnover ratio barely above 1 throughout his year at Kansas. He would see the floor a bit in his rookie season, but his shining moment in the NBA would come in the following summer league, where he won co-MVP honors with 24 points per game and fucking 64% three-point shooting. That's crazy. This got him some props from the NBA diehards, but after he failed to bring the same energy and play into the next season, his time had come, and the former #1 recruit had somehow played his way out of the NBA in just 2 seasons. He wasn't exactly a hard worker, he wasn't really that likable, and he was impossible to coach because he didn't feel the need to learn anything different. And in a league where players are constantly getting better and better, that's a major red flag. Since leaving the NBA, Selby's played just about everywhere, from China to Argentina. But who knows where he'd be right now if everything panned out and this guy actually felt a little accountability. As the top power forward in the class of 2014, Cliff Alexander used to be special. And shit, he didn't even play organized basketball until 8th grade. But the Amari Stoudemire-like big man was a terror on the glass and could block shots in and out of this arena. And after recording a triple-double with blocks against fellow prospect Jahlil Okafor, people were sure that Alexander had the talent and the strength to hold his own with NBA-level big men. But after signing on to play for legendary coach Bill Self at Kansas, things seemed off. He'd start off the season on the bench, and with all of the tenure and experience around him, it seemed like he was just one bad defensive rotation from being benched indefinitely. And he didn't have the best relationship with his coach either, who said Alexander lacked motor. Self didn't let the young freshman play through his mistakes, and even though he was averaging 16 and 12 per 40 minutes and shooting well over 50% from the field. But near the end of that season, Alexander no longer had a chance at playing because the NCAA would launch an investigation regarding improper benefits that his family had received and about the possibility of his mother's initiation of pre-draft loan processing. But he declared for the draft anyways. Although he had limited on-court action, he still hoped that he could show teams what they'd get in him. But after injuring his knee in a pre-draft workout for the Lakers, he wouldn't get any more in, and he would end up going undrafted but quickly found a home. His agent claimed that Alexander had about 15 offers from different teams, but would end up joining the Nets for the Summer League, before signing a 2-year deal with Portland, where he would log minimal minutes for a season before taking the classic routes of going overseas. At one point in time, he was just too big and too strong, but over time, he became a project for teams to work on, and at some point, the project became way too big. He had all the tools that he needed to be a tough player, from his long wingspan to his grown man strength, but no team was able to figure him out and utilize him. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're trying to hit 100K this year. And as always, I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.